Hi, everyone. I want to welcome everyone. My name is Jaime Alves. I am Associate Professor of Literature here at the college and in the Bard Master of Arts and Teaching program, where I'm also faculty chair. I am so pleased to welcome you tonight to the second panel in a series on approaching controversial topics in education, which is curated by the Bard MAT and supported by generous funding from the Open Society University Network. We are recording this event so it can be posted on the MAT's YouTube page. So please be aware that we're doing that, and please share it with your friends and colleagues who might be interested. It's typical for us to begin public events with a reading of Bard's land acknowledgement and also its slavery acknowledgement. Because this is the second event in this series and we read those acknowledgements aloud in full at the first event, we won't read them again tonight, but I want to just direct your attention to them in the recording of the first event in this series, which lives on the Bard MAT YouTube page. You can also read the text of both the land acknowledgement and the slavery acknowledgement on the college's DEI office website at bard.edu/DEI. The URL for that website will be posted beneath the recording of tonight's event on the Bard MAT YouTube page. These acknowledgements are an important piece of our collective ongoing efforts to show our respect for and awareness of the people and cultures that were harmed by actions and policies associated with this institution in the past. And they serve as a call for all of us to work together to redress and repair such harms wherever we can. Tonight's roundtable focuses on working across disciplines, and we are so fortunate to be joined by a panel of educators, all from Kingston High School, who have collaborated with each other or are currently collaborating with each other in a variety of configurations, reaching outside of what can sometimes feel like the silos of our individual subject areas to develop lessons and instructional materials together. So we'll hear them talk about the specific projects they collaborated on and how that collaboration began and evolved, as well as how educators in our audience might begin to think about developing such collaborations with colleagues in their own teaching contexts. I also want to underscore the idea that although talking with colleagues across disciplines is always a great idea and can always help us improve our instructional practices and bolster the supports that we offer our students, mutual support and collaboration among teaching colleagues feels particularly valuable and necessary in the context that has inspired this series of curated talks. We know that teachers are facing increasing challenges to the materials that they teach in our secondary schools. We talked in our last event about book bans and book challenges. You're likely all familiar with the recent attacks on the College Board's AP African American Studies course in Florida, for example, and have likely heard about other kinds of blowback around teaching things from climate change to evolution to the ways that the US economy is impacted by racial and social and environmental realities, just to name a few examples. And so as we proceed tonight, I want to encourage our audience to be thinking about your own disciplines, about the kinds of materials that you're planning to teach that might be challenged, and to consider ways that this stellar panel of experts might model for us a way forward. So I'm going to introduce our panelists now, and from there we'll move to some prepared questions around each of their collaborative projects before opening the floor to any questions. Okay. So Cassandra Taylor is a retired Kingston High School ELA teacher and is currently mentoring apprentice teachers with Bard's MAT program. She's also leading our team effort to produce this series on controversial topics in education. Because Cassandra worked closely at KHS with most of the educators on this panel, she's going to be both a panelist and a facilitator tonight, so used to wearing many hats, so I think that'll be fine. The next to Cassandra's left is Britni Timbrouck-Roddey. She's a social studies teacher at Kingston High School, teaching 9th grade global history, civics, and will be teaching AP African American history next year. Who's next? Zanyell Garman is an ELA teacher at Kingston High School, teaching 9th grade literature and a senior elective called African American Literature. And then next we have Amy Kapes and Edith Schwimmer, who are both social workers and DASA coordinators for Kingston High School. And then Molly Albrecht is also a co-facilitator for tonight's roundtable, is an education faculty member of the Bard MAT program and interim dean of students at Bard College of Simon's Rock. So please join me in welcoming our wonderful panel. Thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to you, Molly.
Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I'd like to start by turning to Edie, Amy, and Cassandra to talk to us about their work teaching the young adult novel, Speak, by Laurie Hulse Anderson. And my first question is going to be to Cassandra. If you can begin by telling us, especially for people that may not have read the book, what that book and unit was about. But what I'm also really fascinated about is the fact that you invited clinical staff into the classroom, and I think that that's brilliant and amazing, and I want you to talk about that if you could, please.
Yes, Speak is a phenomenal book. I think to this day, it came out in like 1999 or 2000, and it's still like a favorite of students. And I noticed when I was first hired for Kingston High School, that was part of the curriculum, and I was really excited, and then I was like, oh, because it deals with a lot of heavy stuff. If you've never read the book, it's about a young 13-year, I think she's about 13, a young girl who was sexually assaulted the summer before her 9th grade year. And due to circumstances, friends, other people in the school don't realize that this happened to her. All they know is that she called the cops on a party that got busted. That's all they know. So she is entering 9th grade with, you know, the trauma of sexual assault, being bullied and ostracized. Her parents are going through a divorce. There's a lot of heavy stuff there. And I realized, again, as an experienced teacher, you know, I felt very confident in the material, but also realizing that this is heavy stuff for young people and what it can bring up for the young folks in my classroom, and also wanting to make sure that they had support and knew who the support was for them in the building, and to see that connection that, yes, this is an English class, but we are connected as staff as well, and we're all here to help you, and we know what we're teaching you, and we all know this content, and we're all here for you. So I had reached out to Amy and then to Edie both to come in and talk to my students about consent and what that looks like, and what happened to the main character, and what support systems do they have within the community, within the school. And it was really important for me to acknowledge, you know, I am not an expert here. You know, as confident as I might feel in the material, I wanted folks who were experts in talking about trauma and guiding students through that with me. So it was about thinking outside the box and realizing, you know, what do my students need the most? And they need to hear from other people, you know, who have expertise within that area as well.
Thank you. So my next question is for Edie and Amy, and that is, what information did you bring into the classroom to help them, one, navigate the material that was in the book, but also to, as Cassandra alluded to, possibly connect them to resources within their own community? And then I have another question that's two parts. As a school administrator, I'm always so interested in teachers knowing about trauma and making sure that they recognize it when it's occurring or maybe manifesting within a student. And I'm wondering how often you have been asked to come into a classroom and collaborate with another teacher, because for me, I think it's not that often, but I'd like you to speak to that.
Can we use the microphone?
Yeah,
Do you
sure,
mind,
sure.
Just so that it's
Are you able
recording.
to- is this on?
Yeah,
And you can take it
they're
out.
all on. You can take it
Do you
right
want
out
me to
of
start
there.
all over?
No, you don't have to start over.
Sure. So first the book.
So first the book. So I can say, you know, I brought in statistics and symptoms and kind of gave some context, and we talked a lot about triggers and trauma and what that actually looks like day to day, but it also gave me an opportunity to kind of eyeball the students in the room. Not every student is necessarily going to reach out, but there were certain things that kind of cued me into, or Cassandra into what might be going on for a particular student, or that they may be having some sort of reaction or may need support in some way. So I felt like it was also really important there. And also in terms of her relationship, right? She's seeing these students on a daily basis, and so I think it felt validating. I think that for a lot of students in the room, they felt like we can talk about these things here, and that's so super important, because whether it came up through conversation regarding that particular book, or it was something that happened later in the year, she identified herself just by having us there as somebody who could help them get where they needed to go, or who cared about them as a whole person. So I felt like it was really important in that way as well.
I wanted to echo one of the things that Amy said when you said that Cassandra's working with the students. I stepping back one step, because if those of you are in the MAT program or going to be educators, I've always said I'm a social worker. I have an office. I'm out in the halls. I'm in the lunchroom. But the first responders in a school are the teachers. It's the teachers. And when you see something, you have to say something. And we want teachers to feel validated and empowered to do that, right? And so I really feel like the model that you created, Cassandra, for our school is actually being followed by other teachers. So that was really something. I mean, you have an incredible resource here. Thank you for that. And it's true, because I have spoken about this novel after you left with other teachers who are using the same model that and if I'm not mistaken, you made this model happen, right? So I just want to say that I thank you for that, because that legacy lives on in the high school, even as you're here. But look what we're doing. We're teaching that model from the very beginning, before your teachers are even in the classroom. So I just want to say how much I appreciate that, because people will come in looking for those supports and looking for that for the for the clinical staff members who can say, hey, I need a little help with this, or there's some content here, would someone collaborate with me? And so I think that's really important, and I just appreciate it so much. And as far as speaking with the kids, it was quite an experience to do that, because and I'm sure that all of you have experienced this yourselves, when you're teaching students, it's relevant when it's relevant. And kids they can be triggered, and they can be all of a sudden have thoughts and feelings about something that happened to them and not know where to go with it. And like Amy said, eyeballing the students and knowing that there are kids in the classroom who really do need some help, and they may not even be aware of what the supports are, or that they need help, right? Until they feel like they need help. So the material is so relevant, it's so important, and so complex, that it really warrants having staff in there to help, to make sure that the kids know that whatever this is bringing up in them, that there's support and there's a safety net for them. And the model of also us all working together is really important to kids too. They want to see adults caring for each other, respecting each other, and working together. So all of that, I think, is the real learning experience from the beginning to the end. So it's a great model.
I don't think I'm a good interviewer, because I'm so interested in what you're saying that I forgot my question. But this is again another two-part question. So I had these folks in class last night, among others, and we were talking about the topic of mental health kept coming up again and again, especially since COVID. But also, it's interesting that you're here this evening, because another topic came up, and that was DASA. And I kept reiterating that this isn't just sort of like a fly-by-night phase, but that this is a very serious New York State law that protects students. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about the mental health patterns that you've seen since COVID, which I kind of know the answer to that, but if you could speak to that, and also the importance of DASA, that'd be great.
Pandemic or DASA?
I'll take pandemic.
Oh,
I think
For
we're both gonna
500,
take
right.
pandemic. But, we're all gonna take pandemic. But I really, so it's a really good question, and I'm really glad. I think that I think we were just talking about this before, before we started to record, and that is that the evidence is coming in, but we already know that the years that kids missed, that our students missed, were really critical developmental times for them, socially, emotionally, academically, cognitively. Every area of development was really, put on hold at different levels. And our kids who are the most at risk are still suffering the most, right? So they got further behind. If you live in a chaotic place with little food, and all of a sudden, where you go for order is now closed, where you go for food is now closed, where you go for love and support is closed. A lot of our students we saw falling further behind. So any of the gaps that we had pre-pandemic in any of the developmental areas are much more, the gaps are bigger. And kids, classrooms are restored, congregate settings, the cafeteria is no longer in rows. All of those things are back to normal, but mental health is still lagging behind. And our systems and supports are, unfortunately, they got a little thin. So, we're really working very hard to support the mental health of students, and there's a lot to be done. And I'm sure that everybody knows that already. It's something that we know. The numbers are coming in, so if you start looking up the statistics on suicide rates and mental health crises, hospitalizations, and as we know, hospitalizations are getting worse because beds were taken away, and there's just a lot to it. So we do a whole lot of collaborating on how to best use our resources. So I hope that answers some of it, and feel free to ask if I didn't cover something. We'll be glad to do that. Sure.
That was very comprehensive. Yeah, I think so.
What would you have to say for DASA, specifically for a first-year teacher, if you don't mind?
Use it. It's a tool and it's a vehicle. I think that often what happens is that something, it's similar. So when staff, particularly new staff, are faced with, do I make a CPS report? Do I not make a CPS report? Should I say something about what I heard? What do I do with this? They can access the social workers who have a lot more experience with that, and we, will be able to help guide. But I think that ultimately, what I'll often say is that it's not for you to decide. You call it in, the decision is made. You're a reporter, not an investigator. You don't need to bear the burden of those extra pieces, and we can help sift through some of that. So similarly with DASA, I think that if a student says, I'm feeling this way, or this person is doing this, or you witness something, you can bring it to the DASA coordinators, and we will then take it from there. And I think that again, back to the see something, say something, always err on the side of caution, always ask, because I think that it happens, I know that it happens much more than it's reported. And so if a student is saying something, or if you're noticing something, then it's crucial, I think, to intervene in some way, to let them know that, they are safe, or can be, and will get the support that they need to get there.
Do they know what the acronym means, DASA? We said
The
last
Dignity
night,
for
but
All
you
Students
definitely
Act,
did.
yeah.
Okay. And in what ways do you wish that teachers would utilize, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to use the microphone. I'm going to just stay with my day job. So in what ways do you wish that teachers would utilize your expertise in the classroom more? Which I think you had alluded to a little bit.
Yeah.
Cassandra's starting to use that. Cassandra started that model a bit.
And I appreciate you saying that even as a seasoned teacher who's comfortable with the material, you still thought, why not have the extra layer there, right? Why not have additional, additional support there? And so that's what I wish. I am always happy to consult or collaborate. I think that, and I know that Edie is the same way, and I would rather that we kind of provide more than take the risk of providing less. And I wish that for teachers who don't, I feel like a lot of conversations are not had, or things are not really fleshed out because, or unpacked because people don't necessarily feel equipped to have those conversations. They know maybe that what was said, what they overheard wasn't great, so they shut it down, but then they don't go back to it, and there's no reparative or restorative kind of conversation around it or education around it. And so I wish that I wish that we were used more in that way, where it was, either somebody asking maybe how can I or should I revisit this conversation, or could you come in and we can do it together. That's what I wish. I wish there was more of that, because we hear often the other side of it, where the student feels like, well, okay, you made them stop talking, but was that because it was a side conversation or because you heard what they said and what it meant for me?
Sure.
So.
Thank you.
Yes to everything that Amy said, and I also feel like because we have not every teacher, but a lot of teachers reaching into other disciplines and collaborating, I think that we're really fortunate where we are, that a lot of the teachers do reach out to us and say, hey, listen, I heard this, and I think that when we got Teams, which took us a little bit of time to like, oh, what are we doing here? Why are we, but now. Microsoft Teams. No, Microsoft Teams. Right. And I actually want to talk about this, the administrative structure that we have that is helpful.
Yeah.
What we have is an assistant principal, a social worker, psychologist, 2 school counselors, and a nurse for every class cohort. And we start in the 9th grade, and that team follows the class all 4 years. So it's sort of like school within a school. You have your own administrator, your own social worker, your own psychologist, and school counselors, and they stick with you. They're stuck with us, or we stick with you, whichever way. And so we really get to know the kids that way. So they're not moving in a school of somewhere close to 2,000 students. They have a home base with their administrative team, and we move with the kids, but at grade levels, the kids will experience different teachers. So, but we work with all of you, right, over a period of 4 years, and then we cycle back around and pick up the 9th grade again. So, and Amy's got seniors this year, and I have the 11th grade. So I do feel that teachers are coming to us more post-pandemic because the mental health need is so great. And they can see it. They can see it. So whatever modeling we had for that, whatever collaborative relationships we had, I think those are much better. And teachers who previously were a little siloed are now coming and saying, listen, this is more than I can, I heard this kid say this, or I saw this situation. So I think they're coming to us more because the need is so great. So.
Thank you.
I think the other thing that I wanted to mention, and I know that Edie has mentioned this all the time as well, but your clinical staff, they're there for you as well as a teacher, and we forget that. We forget that. They're for the kids, but the support. You're talking about staff support, but I've reached out. Other colleagues I know have reached out when they needed resources, or I just have to talk about the situation, or so again, you're getting support for your students, but they're also supporting you as well. The Edie and Amy coming into my classroom supported my students, but also helped support me. And as we're also talking about controversial topics, if I had been challenged, it does help then to say the administrative team is behind this, clinical staff was with me. All of the, you bring all your people with you, but you got to get people, right? You have to meet people. Don't be afraid to collaborate, and then you have your people to back you up with what you're teaching, what information you're giving to students, and also people for you to turn to when you need that support. So I wanted to mention that, because that's really important. We forget that piece. Well, I want to turn now to talk a little bit about some of the electives. Zanyell and Britni, we both have kind of collaborated on African American literature and history in different ways, and I wanted to kind of open up the discussion on bringing in new courses, especially in light of all the kerfluffle and hoopla, you know, that's happened. Ethnic studies is again being, you know, attacked across the country. And I wanted to open up that discussion about challenges that you may have faced or are anticipating with the courses that you have. And I wanted to start with Britni, and let's go back, like, going back before pandemic, before the great divide that's happened in our country. But what were some of the reasons you felt it was important that KHS implement an African American literature and history course in the high school? Like, what were you thinking about?
Okay. So I remember we had an interesting freshman class that we shared.
Yep.
And I remember a few students that really were struggling with feeling comfortable with certain conversations, and it was coming out in disrespectful ways. It was coming out in hurtful ways. And I remember thinking, if we don't start having these conversations and letting them have a space, not just our students of color, our white students as well, and we're not teaching them this history proactively, that we were going to graduate students that I did not feel comfortable sending out into the real world.
Yeah.
And that was one of kind of the moments that I was like, we need more classes for them to have these conversations in a safe place, and to have teachers who are organizing this information for them and giving them a way of learning, and not just what they're being funneled through the news or whatever media they choose to follow.
And along with that, and I remember us talking about that and saying, yes, we're gonna move forward. And then, you know, we talked about it with our departments. Departments were like, okay, yeah. But then where did the stonewalling happen? Because that's what happened.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for them to know about what happened.
So we were very excited about it, and we thought we had a really good plan, because there is another course that had the same model that we were hoping to put forward, where it was an English credit as well as a history credit. And so we went to our administration and we told them what our plans were, we told them what our thoughts were, and at that point it was really shut down for various reasons. A lot of it having to do with scheduling, a lot of it having to do with what credit would go where, what grade would it work with, because if they're in this grade, they already have this course, so if they're in this grade, they have to take the regents, and at that point it was kind of just dead in the water. It's not gonna happen, which is then how I think you ended up going the African lit route, because it was okay to have two English teachers or have integrated, but it was more of the two disciplines that they were really kind of telling us wouldn't work.
Exactly.
But it does work, because we see it happening right now with a different course.
Yeah, we had, I had worked in other places where, you know, the English department and social studies department were pretty much at least lockstep, if not actively team teaching and collaborating with each other. And it was a wonderful opportunity, and it was so hurtful for them, you know, to say that, oh, we can't do this right now, we can't find a way for it to work for our very specific course, but see it in action with other courses within the building, and not to see the same effort. And you know, we did wonder, you know, is it the topic? Are they worried about pushback? You know, what is the issue for our students? And you know, to this day, I don't know the specifics, but they were more open to, well, if you each teach it separately, you know, of separating it, not us teaching together, which I think is really important for students to see educators working together, you know, but keep it separate, then maybe it could work. And it was something else, you know, but it was very disheartening. And then I did push forward with African American Lit, and they were okay with African American Lit as long as it fit within one particular space. And again, there was the argument over the scheduling and both seasons. Some students come and they go. There are other courses that manage to balance that. Students who have to leave and come during the afternoon, but it was a big issue. And I think it still is, it remains an issue, I think, for having multiple sections of trying to think about that. But at least breaking it apart, they were more open to contemplating it, but missed a huge opportunity here.
Well, I was gonna say, I felt they were more open to it for English, because there's not a 12th grade English. Is there a required 12th grade English course?
It's
Right.
electives, yeah.
Right, so,
English 12.
the-
English
right.
12, but anything in the senior.
Right, where
Yes.
with history, I think the issue
Civics.
was, there was civics, there was an actual course that they had to take, and I felt they were proposing it was gonna be an issue of what do we do with these seniors if they choose to wanna take this class. That's how I felt.
It was rough. But moving forward, so African American literature is still going. Zanyell Garman still is teaching that course. But now the proposal for AP, African American history, has come up. And I know you were approached about teaching that course.
Yes.
Where is that now? Where's that stand? Do you know what the plans are?
I do not know what the plans are. I have not heard about it since I was approached about it. And I will say that you all are gonna have moments when you're teaching where things are gonna happen, especially as teachers of color, that feel hurtful to you. Because even the way I was approached about teaching the course felt very like, of course I do want to teach the course, but it felt like you're gonna teach the course because you're the only Black history teacher, so just so you know, this is gonna be the course for you to teach. And so it felt kind of like, well, I would have liked to have been approached, you're a good teacher, we really think you're gonna be good at this, not you're Black, so you're teaching this class. But since I was approached about it, and that was at the very beginning of the school year, I've not heard anything else about the course at all. So I'm not sure that Kingston's going to put the course forward. I don't know what's gonna happen with the course, and I haven't heard anything else.
Goodness, I hope it doesn't. Are you worried about changes to, because there's been a lot of controversy about changes to the curriculum because of Florida's governor's, changes, and do you think that might be some of what maybe has held things
Yes.
up, is because the AP board is still
Yeah.
tinkering?
Yeah, I think that Kingston's not sure what's gonna happen with the course. I think that there may be some concern about what the course looks like. Is it gonna be controversial? Kingston had tried to put forward a different program that the parents really pushed back about, so I'm sure there is some hesitation of, do we want to do something else controversial while we're still in the middle of getting ready to implement the first thing that was super controversial? That is a thought that I have. I am concerned that they're paring it down, because I think that the essence of the course is starting to be kind of teased out and pulled out. But I do feel confident that we live in a state where I feel a little bit safer, that even if they do pull some of that stuff out, that I would still feel safe to infuse it in the way that I would want to infuse it anyway. So I do feel thankful for that.
So I want to talk a little bit about Zanyell's course, African American Literature, and just, since that course, it has been running, but as we prepare for AP, African American History, maybe, and just the current climate, I'm curious, Zanyell, what has it been like for you teaching that course within this current climate? How have the students, have they been very receptive? Have you gotten questions? Have there been pushback?
So the students have been pretty receptive. They've been really excited about the course. Doing the current events, it's gotten to the point with, with the way that the world is right now, they'll be like, did you hear this? I'm gonna send this to you, I'll send it to you on Teams. So it's gotten to a point where a lot of them are bringing in different things for us to talk about. As a second year teacher in a new district, it's a little nerve-wracking, but I feel like it's really good work to be done. On parent-teacher night, one of the parents came in and she said she was really grateful that her kid was able to take the class. And the sibling of the student talked about how like they would have really liked to have that when they were in the school. So despite like the world the way it is right now, I feel like I've gotten a lot of support from their parents. And even with that, they put it on Facebook at one point, and a lot of people were really supportive. The staff have been supportive. So
That's good. That's really good to hear.
With this, a difference with the course, when I first proposed it, I did teach it with a special education teacher, and then for a while there wasn't a special education teacher. Now you're paired with a special education teacher whose background is in history. How has that helped in the classroom, or what has that dynamic been like?
it's been an interesting dynamic. I enjoy having a history teacher in the class. I'm decent with history, but I like having like, you know, I'm like, so what date was that? And be able to say it. Yeah, we're reading Kendra right now. Like that's the time of this, right? You know the name of that. So it's been helpful to have him come in and do that. And we've talked about, especially for next year, collaborating a little more closely on, if we have an integrated course next year, collaborating more closely on how we can bring different history aspects with the different things that we teach, with the different stories and books and things.
That's awesome.
So then my follow-up is for both of you. So let's say it's a go. African American history, AP is a go. And they're going to say again, we can't block it. I'm sure we can't have you go teach together. What would you do to collaborate? Because you'll have two courses that are, you know, the info feeds off of one another. The literature comes from the history creates the literature. So what could you do if you could brainstorm for our students? Because this is kind of some of the out-of-the-box stuff you have to think of.
Yeah.
You know what you want to cover. You know that there's a colleague down there who could help me with this, but they're not going to give you the time. They're not going to build it into your schedule. So what can you do in order to collaborate?
Because it would be a great opportunity,
Yeah.
you know?
Finally.
Yeah, I agree with you, right? It's almost like a makeshift version of what we were trying to do. So the first thing that just comes off the top of my head is I would love to just know what stories that they were reading, what books they were looking at, and be able to say, great, I'm going to do this at the same time as you're doing that, and I'm going to start with this part of the history. That way when you get to that part of the book, they're going to know where they're coming at. I would love to be able to do some type of final project together, right, where there's like a history portion, maybe they're giving, you know, some type of presentation on some type of research that they've done in your class. Yeah, that's just off the top of my head brainstorming. I don't know, you have any ideas?
No, I was thinking the same thing, because I think a lot, like what you were saying, the literature goes with the history, and we bring a lot of history into some of the literature that we teach, like with the piano lesson, they loved that, we acted it out, but there was so much about like the Jim Crow era and things around that, and with Kendra, there's, like she's going back in time, it's Afrofuturism, sci-fi, but it's also like slavery and 1960s, and to bring that in while you're teaching around those eras would be a lot of fun, and be able to collab with different projects that we're doing.
It'd be really cool.
Mm-hmm. It'd be really cool.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Oh my God, that would be great if they did that. So do you want to jump in, Jamie?
I
feel like my
do.
back is to you.
I do. I'm sorry to be behind you like that.
That's okay.
I do have a bunch of questions. I mean, I think one of them you've already answered, which is what kinds of collaboration specifically, right? Like where, and I'm hearing materials as well as like assessments and final projects. I wonder if, and this is, I think anybody on the panel can sort of jump in, but where are there opportunities for you all in your disciplines to also work with the social workers with this material? That's one of the questions that I have, or maybe the social workers feel like I know how I could jump in. Curious about that. And then another question that's been running through my mind that I hope we'll get to at some point is just thinking about, you know, we're so lucky to have all of you from this one school, but I'm also thinking about how unique that context is, right? Like Edie and Amy were talking about this situation where you get to, as a team, follow the students. And you're also talking about having this desire to work across disciplines, but you aren't necessarily given that structure. our students are gonna be in schools that have maybe very, very different structures, so I'm wondering, I guess my larger question is, what advice do you have for first-year teachers to explore, what structures exist, what doesn't exist that they can sort of try and put into place? You see what I'm asking? So take that, and any one of those parts that you'd like.
Let me think first. Come back to me. I have thoughts running through my head. They're just not
I do that.
formalizing in any one.
So,
I'm thinking of both of
right.
your questions on both sides of my head.
I want to sort of segue a little bit from talking like about this sort of like perception that administration is against everything. They're not. It's more I'm not an administrator. I'm a social worker, but working on an administrative team, I really feel like there really are barriers that are almost impossible to surmount without some sort of leadership that says this needs to happen or this needs to happen. And I think that the intentions are always to offer something more creative, more collaborative, but sometimes there really, really are barriers, and I know that's what we've run into in our district, and I think it happens in every district. I think it happens in every district. I think it's really hard to work in public school, and it's really fabulous to work in public school. So understanding what the structure of your school looks like, even walking into the job with the idea that I need to know what the structure of this school is. You're ahead of your colleagues, right? You want to know, what is it? How does this place? What is the vibe? And who's a person that I can go to run ideas by? Where's a door that I can go behind and just like pour my heart out if I need to? I think knowing that that's a piece of what your new position is a really, really genuine sort of metacognition place to be when you go and you get your new job, right? So I think that just saying that and having that be present and part of this conversation is really, really important. It's a big deal, and it's part of what the job is. It is teaching children, but it's also living, walking through the world and thriving in systems that are sometimes really friendly and sometimes that seem, insurmountable. This is the job. That is the job too, right? And it's hard to do. So how do you build a support system within your school? How do you, know how to navigate that? And just knowing that you're walking in with that question, and knowing that it's there, you have to find it, right? So I think that's a really important thing to have in your course as part of, what are we walking into?
Seek out, somebody who you see is doing it right, or what you aspire to be able to do in the classroom or in terms of collaboration or their presence in the building. And I think that seasoned staff can be a tremendous resource. And then I also think finding, we were talking before about, find your people and have a group. A lot of people will say out of the faculty room, but I know that there are little pockets of people that are behind closed doors in, different parts of the building who are doing their thing with their folks, and that it's what, it keeps their sanity.
Okay. So the thought that was permeating, that is coming down now, is yes, it is important to find seasoned teachers, seasoned faculty, but there is safety and support in also finding the other new teachers, right? Most likely when you get hired, not going to be the only new teacher. Finding those people, making relationships with those people, it's going to help you to start becoming grounded. So you have a safe place to talk, you have a safe place to bounce ideas off of. So that, to me, really helped me when I started teaching as well.
Yeah, it was helpful for me too to have that balance of seasoned folks and new folks, because the new folks, they're going going through it with you and definitely understand what that feeling is like. And sometimes, you know, when you've been in it for a while, you're a little removed from all those things that a new teacher is going through. But also, you know, the seasoned staff, are, you know, they've seen, you can't believe what they've seen. They've seen everything. They've seen so many things. And so, you know, no matter how outrageous or crazy things might sound, or I really don't know, I don't know if I can solve this problem at all, the teachers who have been around for a while will probably have some kind of, you know, advice that's solid for you to follow, because they've been there and they've gone through it and had to deal with it as well.
I'm a new teacher, so
Yeah,
it's
I know.
second year.
But where do you get support?
Yeah, I found support with you, obviously. Cassandra was my mentor, and then also with the new teachers, it was just 2 of us at first, and now about 5 of us, and it's been really nice to just have that support. We have a group chat. If we're like frustrated or we're tired, we have to remind each other not to bring work home. It's like, no, you're not doing work over spring break. You're gonna protect your mental health. It's like just having that support has been really helpful, and also the seasoned teachers and just everybody who's been around to be really helpful.
I didn't know if you had another
Can I
question
say
or
one
not.
more thing on that?
Please do.
Sorry, it'll be quick.
Go right ahead.
No, it's okay.
No rush.
Lean into the kids, that's why we're all there.
Yes.
So they energize you, they make you laugh, you know, as frustrating and tiring and exhausting as it can be some days, remember what you're doing there, you know, and I think that at least for me, is always very grounding and, you know, lightens the load.
We have brought up that idea of, you know, getting to know the building. Like Edie said, walking in, asking that question, like what's the culture, what is everything, puts you ahead in so many ways. But also to kind of be, I don't know, how could I explain it? You're gonna be a part of that school culture, but also being able to step back, always being able to step back and be reflective. I think BARD does a really good job, the MAT program in particular, of teaching you that reflection, constant reflection. And you don't want to lose that. I always think that's a dangerous place for educators in particular to be when you don't reflect on your practice. You know, you don't reflect on not just the content that you're giving, but how you interact with the students, you know, just in general, and also looking at the culture of the school. You know, does this fit me? Are there things that I want to change? And that's when you start becoming active within your school community. So then you start feeling, at least I did, you start feeling less powerless when you are self-reflective and you can look around and look at your school and say, okay, these things are great, these are some things that I want to change, and being able to talk to others, your colleagues about it, and then make moves. And we had done that we started a book study a few years ago where we realized just issues of race and class were affecting everything. You know, the students, the staff, everything in such a way. And it's like, well, we need to talk about this. We have pockets of people talking about it with their folks, but it has to be a bigger conversation. So just from a few staff members that then grew into something. And it had so much momentum that then, you know, administration, I think, had no choice but to acknowledge that and say, okay, we're going to put this into, you know, our new teachers. As they get mentored, they need to read this book or follow the book study, or then you change the culture. You know, you actually change the culture so that you don't feel overwhelmed, that you don't feel that this is an institution that's doing things to you that you are not connected to. Be self-reflective, look at the culture of your school, look at what you would like to change, what you think needs to be changed, and as you talk to people, you can start making those changes. It doesn't have to be static. And I think that's another important thing. Another piece of collaboration that we don't think about sometimes is changing the institutions that we're in. And instead of being in those silos, you know, away from each other, if we remember the power of collaborative thought and spending time with each other and getting to know each other across disciplines, you can then start to change the culture within the school to something that feels you know, supportive of everybody in it.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen, and it's amazing when it happens. It's great, and it makes you feel more secure as well.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? I have a question that I recognize may be putting people on the spot a little bit because we are in sort of these humanities disciplines, but I'm curious about whether you have witnessed collaborations across other disciplines as well, or maybe been part of that, and if not, you know, if you have thoughts about how to account for that, you know, like we always say, and I'm an ELA person, right, and so we always talk about how easy it is to collaborate with history, and yet I want to think about why I don't more often consult colleagues across the college in the sciences or in math when there are connections to be made. And I recognize that that's partly a me problem, right? I need to be more imaginative about it. But I just wonder if you have thoughts about that and could comment about it. Anybody wants the mic? I know it's a tough question.
The one thing that does come to my mind, well, two things that comes to mind. One, I think it is just what's more comfortable.
Yeah.
I think that's number one. I think, right,
Mm-hmm.
you feel comfortable with who you feel comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And history and ELA seem so similar, so you feel comfortable in that. There was something that we did try to implement, which was like when we went to see High Tech High in California, and there were social studies, ELA, I think science, and I think math was, and I just remember we were trying to work on a project, and it felt very weird, felt strange, it didn't feel organic trying to put that project together. We came up with something, but then I think COVID happened, all kinds of stuff started happening. But we were excited to kind of try to do that. But I think it comes down to comfortability.
Do you guys remember chemistry for artists that we had for a while? Remember that?
No.
Yeah, you don't? Okay.
No.
I remember it. We have, and we don't have it now for, I don't know what the reason is, but there was a
That
course.
does sound awesome.
Called, right? Called
Yeah.
chemistry for artists. Did you know more, you may know more about it than I know about it, 'cause you're.
I don't, I remember that we had it.
That we had it,
And
right? And I don't know that I was
really
ever
cool
in that
stuff,
class.
But I,
Yeah.
you know, I mean,
Yeah, but you were asking about like, you know.
that's the only one I could think
other
of. I'm trying to think of the
disciplines.
Right.
history,
Yeah, and I don't know what the evolution of that course was, like how it came about, or even why it's not anymore. I don't know, but that's the only one that I can think of.
Project Global, right, that was ELA.
Project Go, right,
History,
ELA,
but it was
history,
also
art as well. But again, those are all humanities that lend themselves to what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know, that the collaboration.
So when I did my student teaching, I did it in Newburgh at the Excelsior program at NFA North. And we did this one project that I thought was really cool because we went up Mount Beacon. As English, we did poetry, we did a little writing about it. Science did something about the rocks as they were going up, and so it was like earth science. Math did how long it would take them to get up there. And then history did the history of Mount Beacon. And I was like, I want that to happen, but they were I think part of it was that they were a small section, so it's like there were 4 teachers in the whole little school, and it was a lottery system, so they had so much time to sit and collaborate and think, and I don't know, we would just, we don't have teams here in the same way where it's all the kids have the same history, English, core teachers, so, yeah.
While you were saying that, what came to my mind was middle school, right? And I think what makes that easier are those teams, is the High Tech High model we were trying to create. I think when you have a team and we work together every day, we have the same kids that bounce between us like you do in the middle school, it does make it makes it more organic. It makes the conversations happening daily. You have the same kids, it's a small number of kids. We're in the high school, at least in our model, we're also separated from each other, and we don't have the same kids. That was the issue we were having with the High Tech High thing. We don't have the same kids. You're talking about a whole lot of kids that might not even overlap with each other, trying to create a shared project, right? We were trying to do it because we had mainly the same kids.
Yeah.
I think that's another piece
Yeah.
Please do it.
Can I add
Please.
one more quick thing to
Yes.
that? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so
Take the whole thing with you.
so we are, talking only to high school people. too.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
that's a really good point, Britni, because, you know, if we're talking about elementary and middle, like you were just saying, we're really bound in high school by 22 credits times 5, you know, Regents exams minimum, or 7 if you're getting advanced read. You know, there's a really like rigid structure in public high school of what you have to earn in order to get your diploma. That's New York State, you know, standards. But you're correct that I feel like if we had some middle school staff here, we'd have a much more rounded idea of what that collaboration looks like.
Yeah.
Because this is all high school staff. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't really a question, I just think it's something that I'm pondering anyway, and I wonder if our students, our MAT students can ponder it as well, because I think we're all acknowledging that as we get into the higher and higher levels of schooling, we do become more siloed, and yet as teachers, we acknowledge that that's a shame, right? Like, we wish that it could we could continue to foster those connections, because that's how learning happens, right? I mean, we all are learning and making sense of our world by connecting the things. We're not actually divided into disciplines inside of ourselves, right? And so what brought me to this whole line of thinking was the comment about how we have to lean into our students and like think about who they are, right? And so in our ELA classes or history classes, we have students who are not like jazzed by that, but they may be helped to be brought in if they can think about how like science is coming up in this text that we're reading, or, right? So I don't know what the answers are, but I just think it's another thing to think about when we're wondering about this big question of working across disciplines. Like, if we don't have teams in our school, we don't have time to co-plan, how can we ask our collaborate with our students to find out what are the opportunities to think across disciplines while we're reading this book or studying this history, or, right? I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's an important question.
Yeah, I wish I'd see opportunities, and I think about the different novels and the different short stories that I've covered, and it's there. Like you were saying, Jamie, it's there to bring in math, to bring in science, and you just feel, I can't do it. I'm overwhelmed, or our schedules don't meet up, or, you know, but again, that idea of collaboration, of meeting people, of trying to resist, you know, being so isolated and siloed, you know, I really think, and I know it's hard if you're shy. I get it. I know that people get shy. But, you know, try as much as you can to meet people, even outside your department. And because I had, on the times that I did bring folks in to collaborate, like I had our librarian come in and teach, and, you know, when the science teachers came in, the secretary, who does the matrix for the entire building, you know, was able to look and see what is a free period, and if I have somebody available to cover their class so that teacher can come and you guys can do your lesson together. Like, that's the kind of the relationships that you build, where someone knows you and they know the work that you do or whatever, and they're willing to try and, you know, this sounds phenomenal. Let me see, you know, what subs are in the building that day. If I can make an adjustment, then maybe. Now, that can't happen all the time, but it just speaks to the power of relationships and getting to know colleagues and not just hiding away. It's very tempting, but hiding because you just want some peace sometimes during the day, but just staying within your room with the door closed, but actually getting to know people and from the building, from all staff, because you collaborate. You know, you collaborate in ways that can be surprising sometimes that you may not even think of, but making those relationships and getting to know the folks in your building, really, the payoff is much greater.
Yeah, that's good. And I think one way that you all can look to do that is advising clubs when you get into the school. I advise 2 different clubs because not only do you get to interact with the students outside of the classroom, so it really gives you a more unique version of them, but you get to interact with your colleagues in a different, more fun environment. And then, yeah, that leads to other things. Yep, absolutely.
we should open up to
Yeah.
comments.
Are there any comments or questions that anyone has?